Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
How's it going? How you doing, bud?
Good. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Gabe, you got the mullet under control. That's good.
You guys can watch me eat my lunch.
Bon appetit. Hey, welcome everybody, and I want to say congratulations to Anthony on the release of this absolutely amazing book. I do have a copy, and it's really I was one of the I don't know, many or few people who was kind of like involved from the very beginning when Anthony just showed me just a few pages of ideas, and it's pretty amazing. Like even, at a later stage where I kind of knew that there was going to be a lot of content, I had no idea that it was going to get presented in this, like I just call it like multi-sensory, as a multi-sensory object that is like so much more than a book. But on the other hand, it's something that you can do with a book and that you can't do with a digital file, so it's and that is kind of like, I like that because it's sort of like a metaphor even for what it means to practice a piece like Fracture, because you can talk about it and you can write about it for, all you want, but you actually need to play it and you need to try it, you need to practice it in order to understand what's going on. And that's also sort of like in some of the, how shall I say, reviews that I've seen. Some people were saying like, how can you spend 22 years learning a piece of music? And then, and those people have not tried playing Fracture. So Anthony, congratulations. And how does it feel to have this book out officially today?
Thank you very much. And I would say it just feels like a relief. I'm just glad it's over. It's kind of like, I interviewed a musician named Sarah Groves, and she said 20 years ago, it was all about the release date with her music. And now she says that the record company's like, it's all about the marketing before it's released, because once the album's released, it's free. No one pays for it after it's released. So I'm sure Ken Kaufman, my publisher, is hoping that's not how it goes with the book. But now that it's released, I feel like, okay, I can ease off on some of the marketing a little bit.
I wouldn't be so sure about that.
Yeah, I know. There's a part of me that thinks everyone who was going to buy it has bought it. But then there's the part of me that's like, well, if the BBC wants to do a 20-minute special on this, and Rolling Stone magazine reached out for a copy, and there's got to be a bigger audience than just the people that I've reached already. So I'm really just glad it's done. And just flipping through the book again made me realize how grateful I am to all of the contributors. It's a global book, contributors from all over the world. But Gabe Riccio, I could not have done the book without Gabe. And Dave Woodruff, who's the designer, he said he's going to try joining this for a little bit at least. What he did to this book, I think Ken said we owe Dave $2 million for what he did on this book. It's really,
don't say that, Ken.
It's really not, like, for me, it's not even about the content of the book anymore. It's about the experience of reading the book, and so much of that is to do with the design of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I think that, the experience or experiencing not just the book, I mean the piece, right? Fracture. Yeah. You can only really understand, even I would say you can even only really understand the book if you at least give it a try and try to play like just the first measure of Fracture as a loop. I mean, talking about the moto perpetuo, of course, right?
Yeah. definitely. It's not it's kind of like having a fit body. You can't virtue signal, being muscular or thin. It requires a lot of discipline. And I mean, with the body, it's at least visual. But with Fracture, you can't really step up to a guitar and say, oh, yeah, I can do that. It's put up or shut up. And there's just no way to fake your way through it. And even if you've played it for 10 years, you still might not be able to put up. You might still be shutting up even after 10 years of practicing it. So it's definitely a tough thing that can't be reproduced without serious practice.
Mm-hmm. So when did you last play Fracture?
It's funny, I actually, this guy named Bill Drennan sent me these. He made his own guitar craft picks out of Dunlop Tortex picks.
Mm-hmm.
And so he sent me these in the mail just the other day. Here's, this is actually one of the really old GC picks. It just has a texture as a circle in the center. Yeah. And Hideo Maria gave this to me at a California Guitar Trio concert. But if you lay the picks over one another, they're the same size. So I thought, when I got this in the mail, I was like, okay, I'll try it out. And I actually played through it about 2 days ago, and it was embarrassing, but it was still fun,
Embarrassing, but still fun.
Well, that's kind of like the tagline for my life. Should put that on my gravestone. Embarrassing, but still fun.
So obviously the title is sort of tongue-in-cheek. Like, how would you kind of, like, looking back now on the whole experience, and that includes the book, mm-hmm. what does this whole experience mean to you?
It's funny. I think people, because of the book and because of the YouTube series and because it's gotten so many eyes, I think people expect a significant answer, spiritual, deep, philosophical thing. But what does it mean to me? It just means I can play the stupid song. Like, that's really all it was ever about. I just wanted to play something, and it was hard. And if it was, there's a million piano players or violinists, or, Itzhak Perlman, I don't know how many years he spent working on Bach's Czech Cone, or how many people, spend all this time playing these Georgi Ligeti piano etudes, or Chopin, or whatever it is. I just happened to be a guy who wrote about it. But I read about a guy, and I wish I could find this article. This guy spent 48 years on I think it was a Beethoven piano concerto before he played it live in New York City. And no one knew it took him 48 years, but after he performed it, somebody said in an interview, like, what was that experience like? And he says, well, I've been working on this piece for 48 years. And so I'm glad that it's done. And I kind of feel that way. It's just kind of like, okay, yeah, I can do this, picking. So it just kind of feels like, I think not as big as you might think. There's a whole bunch of other songs that I still want to play that I just haven't written about. So I think any musician can attest, anyone who's taken their instrument seriously, there's a piece of music that's just really hard, and you got to sit down and just work through it. This just turned out to be more marketable.
I mean, like, if you remove yourself one step from the piece, let's say, and you're actually thinking about the learning process and the process of personal growth that has come with learning the piece of music, I think you can surely say that it had an influence, and also a big influence on your spirituality, whatever that means, really.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, in a way, like, from my perspective as also a practicing musician, there is a point to practicing, at least for me, and that is to get better at adapting, more quickly to new situations. And I hope that Fracture gave you some of that, at least.
Oh, certainly. I think every musician learns to make mistakes and to recover from mistakes. I think Fracture taught me a lot about recovery. I know that there's a lot about playing Fracture, but there's also a lot about not playing Fracture as part of playing Fracture. You have to, if you're going to be playing anything where you're stringing 16th notes together for several minutes at a time, you have to be able to recover from a mistake. And I just went to my kid's piano recital last night. And it's funny, like just a string of eighth notes, and then it was, oh no, I have to stop playing. I don't have the sheet music. I have no point of reference, so the kids, they all stop. And I've seen adults stop too in the middle of a song. And so there's just so much recovery in Fracture that you learn, especially Fractured, more so than Fracture. Fractured is like how to survive a train wreck. That's what that song should be called. Because you just end up, it just feels like you are running, like Usain Bolt, he can run 100 meters in under 10 seconds. But what if he had to do 3 miles of that? That's kind of what it's like when you're playing Fractured. It's really like HIIT, high intensity interval training. And so I think like I've learned a lot about recovery. I've learned a lot about mistakes and forgiving myself. I've learned a lot about my body, especially about the body. And my friend Renee, she's Renee Marie King, she's here, and she's taught me quite a bit about the body too, because she does something called fascial stretch therapy. And I'm sure she is freaking out that I'm even calling her out right now. She's a very modest and quiet, humble person, but she lives right across the street. And between the Alexander technique and what she has been studying for the last few years in terms of this fascial stretch therapy, and she wrote a couple pages in the book, I've learned a lot just about my body, and my, like you said, spiritually, you just learn, if you're going to play any kind of Mount Everest type piece, you learn how to have grace for yourself and how to serve the music, because it's not about playing this thing perfectly. It's about playing music. So it's just kind of, it takes you up a few notches. I think Steve Vai would say, you find a higher vibration or a higher frequency or something like that. And I think a piece like this does that to you.
Gabriel, what do you think about Fracture, the piece? What do you think of it from the perspective of a composer?
I think it's very tight, just one of Fripp's biggest compositional boons, if you will, is he has a great economy of materials, and take a very small idea and he'll weave a massive amount of material out of it. And so his pieces tend to be very cohesive, and there's a great arc to these pieces as well, a great sense of dynamic control. And sorry, she's getting a little worked up here. Yeah, and there's a real climax to it, and yeah, and of course you've got the whole tone thing going on with these pieces. Except I guess climax of Fractured gets Fractured has a more varied harmonic vocabulary, but it's used to great contrasting effect. But yeah, I mean, basically, I think they're fantastically composed, and they're really more than etudes. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah. Anthony, to come back to you. So there's something that I don't yet know, because I really haven't read the book all the way through from the beginning. But would you say that you had an emotional connection with the piece before you started playing it?
Zero, ever. Ever. Only when I played it, for the YouTube video, did I kind of get the chills during the big sort of climax around 8 or 9 minutes. Otherwise, it was just a piece of architecture. Just like, how do you take this piece and what is holding this thing up? It's a very structural. The way I pick music apart is just kind of like architectural: time signature, notes, key signature, the basic building blocks of music. So Fracture was never interesting to me. I think it's just the natural side effect of producing a video series and writing about something that gets hundreds of thousands of views, that people end up sort of ascribing their own fascination with the piece. I don't find the piece, I think, like Gabe said, it's really well constructed and really a lot of cool vocabulary, compositional vocabulary in there. But give me Jupiter by Gustav Holst any day of the week. Give me Bach's Piano Partita #1 by Glenn Gould. These are the pieces of music that move me. Fracture is a fascinating piece, but I've never listened to The Rite of Spring and been like, wow, that spoke to me. It's more like, okay, that was cool. I really enjoyed the Bad Plus playing it live. Like that was way more interesting to me than a symphonic recording. So Fracture to me is just one of many super interesting pieces of music that I just want to, you kind of see that. You see something, you're like, oh, I want that. I don't know what it is, but I just kind of want to collect it in my brain. So Fracture ended up becoming that. Scenes from a Memory by Dream Theater. That album is incredible to me. Really wonderful melodies and everything. And that album moves me a lot. But then they have like 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, and that album is a whole lot of just pieces of music that I just think are fascinating. So I know some people have called John Petrucci just a keyboardist, or someone who types on the guitar, but I just think he's a really interesting player, and I listen to all kinds of guitarists. Bill Frisell's Beatles album speaks to me in ways that Fracture never will. So it's never been, I've never had an emotional connection with it. A lot of music for me is just, if I want to learn it, it's just a string of notes usually. Like that's the way I interpret it in my head. I know that people played it. I know there was emotion behind it. There was intention behind it. But for me, as just a player sitting alone in a bedroom, I'm like, okay, well, how does this work? And how might I employ any of these new tactics to my own music composition or production? Because I like recording and writing my own stuff. And some people might say it sounds like Fracture, and they might be right. But for me, it's more like that's just the way Robert expressed himself at that time, and that's cool. Not every Picasso painting is like moving, and I would way rather listen to a whole bunch of like the King Crimson catalog than Fracture.
Yeah, that is super interesting, because from my perspective, I disagree. I think that maybe there's something speaking through you which is sort of like very different from the European perspective, that is quite different, as some of us know, right? Versus the American perspective. Just like, I find it's very much kind of like a product of its time, but it's still unique. And that is what's so fascinating about it. Like it's nothing like any other music that was released that year in the rock field. But it was the time when people started using sequencers on analog synthesizers. And there were keys where you could transpose sequences up and down and stuff like that. So what I really love about the piece, that it's sort of kind of like disregarding almost any compositional rules that had been established in the classical world, as well as in rock music, and from the perspective of the guitar. And then it kind of like created this really highly intense and atmospheric piece of music. And I think that's what it is, what music in general is about for me. It's about, do I like the atmosphere that it generates for me? And so, you know, just to kind of like tell you where I stand with this piece. And I think like anybody who kind of like attempts to play this kind of piece, it would be great if, and you said that you had that moment of the chills, but I think it would be great if you like make the effort to learn it, that you kind of like get that sense of like the shifting Lydian arpeggio kind of like, you know, that kind of thing is, I think, something that's pretty unique, and I've never really heard it in any other music. And also in the canon of King Crimson's music, I would say it's indeed one of my favorites, if I had to choose.
Yeah, I don't dispute any of that. Just remember that when I picked it up, I was a dumb 16-year-old. I mean, now I'm in a slightly less dumb 39-year-old, but there's still the guy who just picks up the guitar, who wants to just play guitar. And and Fracture for me started as kind of like a guitar challenge, you know, a mechanical challenge. Musically, I guess I totally understand where you're coming from, but again, when you're a dumb 16-year-old and a less dumb 39-year-old, you don't really you don't think always about the context of a time. To me, it was just a track on a CD that my dad had. So I didn't know anything about the year. I didn't know anything about the context. You know, Robert Fripp was a ghost to me. It might as well have been. It wasn't until like maybe 2013 where I really started thinking about the people behind the music. But, you know, from age 16 to about 31, I just saw it as kind of a cool thing to try doing on an instrument, you know. And I know that sounds super immature, but I never claimed to be mature or much smarter than that. You know, I enjoyed typing fast on a keyboard, you know, and I thought, could I get 130 words a minute? Then I hit 130 words a minute. Then it's like, okay, well, can I do 140 words a minute? I enjoy the athleticism of playing and of other things that I do.
So do you,
even writing software can be like that for me?
Yes, yeah, I understand that. Do you have any particular musical challenge for yourself in mind for the near future?
Oh yeah, I have. I took a Ligeti piano etude that was arranged by Conlon Nancaro, and I arranged it for 3 9-string guitars. And it's really fast and really difficult. At some point, I'll put out a recording of it. I also have begun arranging the entire Holst Jupiter piece for guitars and a rock ensemble. That's something that I'm going to be working with a few other guitarists, and Morgan Ogren and Michael Manring on bass. I arranged the Bach piano partita #1 from piano for a 9-string and 6-string guitar. Trey Gunn and I have kind of emailed back and forth about the idea of doing that together. And let's see. Yeah, that's probably about it for right now. I have those 3 things just they're on the backlog, and I'll work on them over time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So in the process of putting together the book, like, who made the decisions as to how present the chapters?
Hey Ken, do you want to speak to this? You're muted, Ken.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, repeat the question, please.
So Ken, during the process of making the actual book, who made the decisions to design the pages or specific chapters this way? Was that the designer, or did you guys ask the designer to do a specific kind of job?
No, in fact, just the opposite, right? So I'm a word guy. I like words, and I like the words to be on the page in a way that's easy to read. So, basically I was pulled into this kicking and screaming and, in agony the whole time. So basically all of the page composition and the creativity of the page arrangements and stuff was done by Dave Woodruff, a brilliant guy. The idea that you're going to do a different composition on each and every page, it kind of boggles my mind. I mean, I just don't understand why anybody would put themselves through an effort like that. But, the book itself and the final result is an amazing, one-of-a-kind work of art. I do think eventually we're going to have a reader's version where the text is in black and white on a page. So the people who really want to study the words will have a version that they can do that too. So yeah, for me, it was a very difficult and emotional process. And that I say that even though there's no reason for it to be, because I did not do the creative work, but I'm such a control freak with my business. The fact that I had to let go and let Anthony and Dave, do their thing with this book was very uncomfortable for me. So, and it was stressful. So why? It's just purely, there was absolutely no reason for me to even worry about it. I could have just daydreamed for a year and let the book be, but instead I'm agonizing over it and worried about it and all this kind of thing. So, I mean, obviously it turned out beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I would ever do another project like this, honestly.
Yeah, I hear you. It really looks like a lot of work and like a, how do you say, pain in the neck, right?
But I didn't do any of that work, right?
Yeah.
So why would I be worried about it?
Yes.
That's a good question.
Yeah, Ken, did you know the piece Fracture? Did you know King Crimson before you were presented with this project idea?
Well, I have never studied King Crimson. I'm a fan, from the Discipline days and seen them live several times. So I'm a fan, but more of it's not something I really studied in depth. It's just more a matter of, they had some records I really enjoyed. The Power to Believe I really enjoy. It's one of my top 100 records. The early stuff, a lot of it to me is uncomfortable and not very sweet to the ear. To me, the pinnacle of music is kind of well-produced pop kind of thing, Steely Dan and stuff like that. So a lot of the King Crimson, particularly the early stuff, is the opposite of that, right? It's challenging to listen to, intentionally challenging. And a lot of it, like Anthony said, is more architectural rather than, flowing melodies or interrelated harmonies and that kind of stuff. It's more like a building blueprint kind of thing to my ear, right? But no, I do enjoy it. I probably had not heard Fracture before pulling this book together or working on this book. In 20 years, I probably had not heard it. But of course, as the book came together, I was forced to listen to it more and more and try to understand it and played it more and more. But yeah, not a super in-depth King Crimson fan, not like some of the fanatics, but definitely music I enjoy.
So if you kind of tune out the design of the book, right, and you just think about the words on the page, on the black words on the white page, do you have a favorite moment in the book? Is there a particular moment or chapter that really kind of, touches you or touched you?
Well, I think more than that, it's just the contributors, the fact that we were able to get such prominent and interesting people like yourself to contribute to the book. That's more, if I look at the book, that's what I'm saying. Okay, so Anthony wrote this thing in 5% of it is his work, but we also got help from many others. And it was that community of assistance that really jumps out to me as a primary achievement of this thing.
Yeah, speaking of which, we have Michael Hacker here, who is presented in a lovely rainbow unicorn beard early in the book. And Michael is a martial arts instructor who he's written several books. He wrote a book, I think it's about Japanese or perhaps just about the martial arts stuff. And I met him through work. We were working together, and I told him I was writing this book, and he's like, "Oh, that sounds interesting." And well, Michael, you can tell the story because you'll remember it better.
Sure. Yeah, we were hanging around at work, just jaw jacking about nothing. And he said, "Oh, I'm working on this book." And I said, "Interesting. Let me see." He sent me a kind of an early working copy of it, and he started showing me, bits of the book. And here's a part where I'm doing this, and then I'm talking about this. And I said, "Oh, this book isn't about guitar at all." Mm-hmm. So this book has a broader message. You're just choosing a particular guitar piece around which to hang all of this stuff. And I think he looked at me like I had suddenly grown 2 extra heads. And then I said, "Okay, let me explain." And I started taking the part, like the thing about posture and about breathing and about how you hold the pick and where on the pick you strike the string and where on the string you strike with the pick and all of these different things. And I started giving him analogies in martial arts for all of these exact things. If you hit somebody on the wrong spot on your fist, you break your hand. If you hit somebody on the wrong part of their body, they look at you and smile. Mm-hmm. You got to get all of the pieces exactly right. Otherwise, it's just futile. And you rely more on dumb luck to succeed with something. And as Anthony sent me like an early draft of the book, he said, "Just write whatever you want. If something strikes you, write something." And I did. And I probably said way too much.
I think I gave the same input to Gabe and Renee. Actually, all of the sidebar contributors. It was just, hey, if you want to write something, go for it. I don't view this as my book and that it's about me. I mean, if you look at my social media, you might think I'm an egomaniac lately, and rightly so. I've been, punching myself just out of what I deserve every day. But just looking at like the book itself, if you see every few pages, there's a contribution from someone else. And that's, to me, what makes it beautiful. This was a 22-year, trek, but it wasn't just me. I mean, for many years, yeah, it's all that time alone in the bedroom. Okay, yeah. But without Marcus telling me that he can hear a straight thumb in the music, without Gabe telling me, like, hey, this is a half step off, and that, the reason this motif looks like this and the other one looks like that is because they're connected by this. And I'm like, oh geez, yeah. And Michael, like when I was able to talk to Michael about these things that seem so counterintuitive, it was cool to hear someone who actually resonated with the almost ridiculousness of this whole story. And Renee, just kind of like when I got back from my Guitar Circle course and I was telling her about Alexander technique, I mean, she told me so many other things that she was learning about with her study of fascial stretch therapy. And then, she's even treated me a few times and she's told me, "Oh, do these kinds of stretches, do these, like hold your body this way, bend this way." And, it reinforces a lot of what I learned on the course. So all of these different contributors in the book, and I don't even know how many there are, 15 maybe. I would say there's probably 15 to 20 people who wrote this book. And they all played a part, which is inevitable when one person is, writing something for 20 some years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You see, like this this theme that Michael kind of like mentioned, that is sort of the underlying theme of the book. Anthony, do you know what he means, and would you be able to verbalize what that is?
I think so. Fracture, or this book is not about playing Fracture. This book is about becoming a person who is able to play a piece like Fracture, who is able to master the things that they do, to become a person who knows the difference between this and this. You know, for a guitarist, they may be like, this guy is so full of baloney, I cannot even deal with it. But when it comes to, you know, like this studio, I built a lot of this studio, you know, with the help of friends, just like the book. I did probably 60% of the work on this studio. And after you drill so many holes, after you hammer so many nails, you start realizing there are, you know, really small details that matter with how you hit a hammer against a nail through OSB sheathing, you know, or how you feed a wire into an outlet box. You know, all of these things start to matter. And you can either be sort of a careless person who just happens to do these things unthinking, or you can be someone who does it with intention. And I think Fracture is really about like the transition from a young, immature, egocentric person to an older, perhaps more wiser, intentional person who questions everything he does and his motivations for good reason, you know, to make life better and make family, community, friends better. This process made me a better neighbor, and I'm really grateful for Renee in my life. We've done a lot of creative work together. I'm a better coworker, and I've worked with Michael, and you know, my interactions with Michael as a coworker changed because of what I've learned in Fracture. I'm a better, you know, I'm a better composer, and working with Gabe on these King Crimson transcription books, you know, like I couldn't have done all of that had I not spent this time with Fracture. So Fracture helped me to become a person who connects with what he does, and to be a person who makes a yes mean yes and a no mean no. And I'm going to either do it or I'm not going to do it, but I'm not going to be wishy-washy and pretend to do it. I might take a really, really long time, but I'm going to be stubborn and I'm not going to give up. And that's what I appreciate about everyone who's contributed to this book. Dave Woodruff didn't give up. It took him 10 months to design the most ridiculous guitar book ever published. You know, Ken Kaufman didn't give up, and he wanted to shove my head through a wall. And he said to me, you know, there are a lot of other publishers out there. You know, it's like you work with people, and it helps you develop sort of a filter for life. So Fracture, while for me is not like, it's not a piece that I recreationally listen to, it has transformed who I am, and the act of playing something like it has allowed me to become a person that I can respect. So that's really what the book is about, like becoming a person you can respect. And a lot of that is in my first book called Clueless at the Work. And it's really about me overcoming my own cluelessness. And as Michael puts it, you go from unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence. And doing all of these things well creates a foundation in your life where you can unconsciously and competently accomplish things. And that's the kind of person I want to become. I'm not saying it's better. It's just I appreciate a world where there's more of that.
To me, the word that comes to mind is craft. Like you've acquired a craft here. So it was some sort of apprenticeship. And so that leads me to asking you about, well, in this context, the master, Robert Fripp, who you've met from my perspective, pretty late. Like when I met him, he was like 40 or something. So how was it? How was it meeting Robert? And did the meeting with Robert contribute to your ability to crack the nut?
There are two pieces of advice that were specifically given to me. Well, actually, three specifically. One from Kurt Golden, where he said, "You're changing strings with your wrist. You got to use your elbow." That was just an off the cuff remark, and it was like, oh my goodness. I could hear the subwoofer go boo when he said that. Time slowed down. Everyone around me didn't exist. That was a game changer for me. And then when Robert gave me two other pieces of advice that I didn't realize, like, he was half making fun of me and half helping me. I thought he was completely making fun of me at the time. But yeah, he told me, you'll never be able to play Fracture unless you can do this. And that's just bending a straight thumb from this joint here. I thought that was almost like he was trolling me, or that was a prank or something. And
why did you think so?
Okay, so about Guitarcraft and the courses. There's like the table that all of the leaders sit at, and then there's the other tables that the normies sit at. And being a normie, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to sit over by Robert. But one day at tea, there was only one chair open, and it was next to Robert. And so I sat down, and he said, "Would you like a stale cracker?" I said, sure. And then he said, "You must be having a very hard time in this course." And I said, I was like waiting for it. I was waiting for him to tell me, "Your ego, you come with too much baggage," or whatever. And I said, "Oh no, what is it, Robert? Why am I having such a hard time in the course?" And he said, "Because you have demonstrated competence and your peers have not." And I was like, oh, wow, that's wild. That was really cool. And then he said, you'll never play Fracture until you can do this. And it was just kind of like, I don't know Robert. I can't say I know Robert. We've spent, outside of Guitarcraft, we've spent 0 time together, or the Guitar Circle course, We've exchanged a lot of emails. He's poked fun of me a lot on social media. So I don't know how to read the guy. And I have friends like Steve Ball who do know him pretty well. And they kind of revel in Robert mocking me, making fun of me, whatever it is. And they're like, well, this means you're in. And so I was like, okay, cool. But I can't, like, if I hung out with Robert, I would love to just have a normal conversation with him that has nothing to do with guitar. But in the context of our meetings, it's kind of like, he's hard to read, and he's kind of mysterious, and you don't know if he's joking or telling the truth. And so when he says you can't play Fracture until you can do this, it's kind of like, is he pulling my leg? And then the other piece of advice he gave me is, you would know this, Marcus, but in the courses, he has parts for people to play, and he'll assign people parts. And then he has the high flyer parts. So I guess people who play a little better, he can give them something harder, more engaging, whatever. And during one session, he kept saying, okay, everyone play this, and they play that. And then he would say, and for the high flyer, and he would give me a harder part. And every part he kept giving me was harder and harder. And then he finally, he gave me the part that I dreaded, that my friend said, he better not make you play this. It was that stupid frame by frame intro, and he looks at me and he goes, and for the high flyer. And then he just the really fast thing. And I couldn't do it. And he goes, next time, don't try so hard.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me at the time, I thought, man, is this guy just trolling me the whole time? Is that what this is all about? And then about a year later, after realizing, you know, how hard I was playing, and after retraining my right hand, that was a very specific piece of advice. He wasn't telling me don't try so hard. Like at the moment he was, but ultimately he was telling me just relax. Don't try so hard when you're playing. Performance comes from effortlessness. So it's kind of like it's hard to know if it's almost like everything he said had a double meaning, and the only thing I could relate to was that movie Mystery Men, where there's a character called the Sphinx, and he says things like, if you can balance a tack hammer on your head, then you can head on a balanced attack from your foes. You know, these kinds of like Yoda sounding things. And so it was just kind of like hard not to laugh about the things that he said to me or to take them seriously. So I really didn't know him or what to do with anything he said to me. But I do treasure all of those moments now, because even just the few sentences he's given me over the years have been very, very helpful. And so I'm very grateful to Robert, even though I don't know him personally. He has helped me significantly in my life, not just on the guitar, but through the guitar, shown me not to try so hard, shown me that performance comes from effortlessness, shown me what basement people are like, and people who have their heads up their own butts and they bump into other people and they get offended. You know, just so much wisdom that's come from him through his craft, through his diary, and through his jokes. So that's kind of where my head's at with Robert. I'd love to spend a couple hours with him outside of anything guitar and just say thanks and talk about just normal life.
You know, he may still be a very inspiring person, even if not talking about guitar, you know.
Exactly.
Like I can second what you were saying. And also, like, Michael just wrote this little story that one teacher, like 35 to 40 years ago, said to him, "Listen with your big toe." Right? And it took Michael a long time to figure out what that means. And to me, it's still like that with the influence that Robert had on me. And I think that, like, he is really a very gifted teacher or instructor in a way where he kind of like uses language to inspire, and he uses language to convey, as you say, like, it's not clear what he means, so you have to find out. You have to experience it for yourself, what it means to not be playing so hard or not trying so hard, right? And so for myself, I remember that sometimes I remember this one specific 15-minute one-on-one lesson I had with Robert in '95, I think. So that is like 26 years ago. Unbelievable. And I still remember it sometimes when I'm practicing and I have like an insight. And then I realize this insight actually comes from something that my teacher, Robert, has said to me 26 years ago. It's incredible. So for me, he's been a great, just a great person in my life. And I never attempted to play fracture.
Well, I think
that's not true, but
I'm sure you gave it a shot. But there's so few teachers like that, that you don't know how to respond. And Robert, I mean, I don't mean anything I say in a negative or insulting way. He's a mystery. He's a very unusual man. And I mean that in a complimentary way, because I think anyone who's sort of out of this world deserves some sort of attention, not in the sort of modern social media way, you know, like clickbait. He's been this mystery for decades, and it's consistent, and he has a very functional way of life, and more importantly to me, a very sustainable way of playing guitar. And I don't want to end up with a wrist brace or an elbow brace when I'm 65 years old, you know, still trying to pull off some difficult guitar stuff. He's given me a sustainable way to perform on an instrument and to approach music that I will keep with me for the rest of my life. And it didn't matter if his name was, you know, Jimbo McGee across the street, a totally unknown teacher, or Bobby Fripp, you know, out of somewhere Middle England, right? Breedenborough. So it doesn't matter. It's just that he happens to be famous. He happens to be the guy from King Crimson, and he wrote this piece, which I would imagine there are dozens, if not hundreds of pieces like Fracture that have touched someone in a special way that they end up giving a lot of time to it. So yeah, that's just the equation that this ended up being, you know, Robert Fripp plus me plus the course plus YouTube plus all of these people that I've come across, you know.
You know, you said there that there are not that many people like Robert Fripp, and obviously I agree. However, when I first experienced him, I was 18 and I didn't really know what I was getting into. And I had this, you know, the experience with a person like that. And so since I have met him, I do recognize the kind of quality that he has in other people as well that I meet along the way. And I think it's absolutely crucial in a way that as musicians or in general, as human beings, we sort of like accept as many, we accept as many teachers as we can find, and we say yes to them, and we kind of like spend time, a little bit of time with them at least, and kind of like take, and, you know, we'll be given what is needed for us, right? And so I'm really grateful that you got to meet him. And you know, I wish I had like an obsession with one of his pieces at some point. Never had that. But then, you know, I loved analyzing his solos. You know, I transcribed his solos, and I learned a lot from that. Yeah, so I know that you have known Mike Keneally for a while. So did you just ask him, like, do you want to write something for this book, or was there like a deeper sense of getting him to contribute?
Well, actually, Mike ended up becoming a fan of the Failure to Fracture series. And I don't remember whose idea it was to ask Mike, if it was Ken's idea or my idea. But Mike actually, he played a solo concert in my living room. And after the concert, he said, "Can you show me how to play Fracture?" And I said, "Yeah, sure," you know. And I just kind of walked him through what I had learned, and I, you know, shaped his hand and did this thing, and showed him like how he would need to change his picking, because Mike, he's totally self-taught. And if you watch I grew up watching him on the Zappa's Universe VHS, and there are parts where he would pick and his hand would become like this, and he would pick super fast, but his hand was shaped in this completely tense, locked up way, which is fine if you only need to do it for 5 seconds at a time, 6 times a night, you know, not a big deal. So then Mike was already playing with the sharp pick, a Tortex, a green Tortex. And so we just sat down for about 10 minutes after this concert, and he just was trying to do it. And he's like, "I don't know, man, I don't think I'll ever be able to do it." So that kind of planted a seed in my brain that Mike, like an association between Mike and Fracture. But Ken, did you ask, or did I?
Well, I think it was me.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, like I really did not have any insight into the process, how everything came together. But it really, yeah, as you say, it's more of a group effort than I was realizing, which is pretty amazing. Like, my perspective on the book was really that because it sort of shines a light on a specific, let's say, school of thought when it comes to acquiring knowledge, let's say, right, in a greater sense. That I think it's really the first time that I see a book that may work in the popular in popular culture that kind of transports this kind of knowledge. And that's what I was really excited about, Anthony, when I realized what was going on. And so now, like I was really a little bit like positively shocked that it really went this far with the presentation. And because I remember there is like this book that I read, guitar book that I read, like maybe in the mid-90s. I can't remember the name of the guy now, but like Zen Guitar or something, or Guitar Zen, or do you know that book, Anthony?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, it was interesting because it sort of was like, there was also Mick Goodrick's Advancing Guitarist, which was kind of like pretty hands-on actually with notation and stuff also, which was an amazing guitar book, I find. And then there was this book, Zen Guitar or Zen Guitarist or something. And
Is it Philip Toshio Sudo?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was a book that sort of like made the rounds, also within guitarcraft circles back then, and it's kind of interesting, and I would recommend checking it out. It's very different, but it's also very interesting.
Well, one other thing I want to add here is I just like making stuff, and so that's kind of where the YouTube stuff comes from. That's where my music comes from. And this book to me is kind of like making a YouTube video. Yeah, it's like a really long and expensive YouTube video, but it's just kind of done. It's an artifact, and then I'm ready to move on, So I'm really glad that it's touched people, and I do hope people buy it. But I think I'm sure you felt this. Once something's done, you're just like ready to go, move on, and I agree. The presentation of the book is incredible. And to me, I feel like this is Dave's book with my words in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean that in a negative way, about like, I'm not trying to rip on myself or anything. It is so beautiful. It's an incredible product. I'm not here. This is not a commercial. Like, it is just an unbelievable product. It feels great. It smells great. Like, flipping the pages is a great experience. There is so much sheet music in here. It's kind of nuts. Gabe had a lot to do with that. He helped me so much. So when I look at this, I see this kind of like a commemoration of all of the great people and funny things that kind of happened along the way. So to me, it's like, this is an awesome product. I hope people buy it. I understand why they wouldn't, but I hope you do buy it, because everyone who's picked it up, whether they know a thing about Fracture or the guitar or anything, they flip through and they're like, wow, this is awesome. They don't know anything. They're not even reading a word. It's just a cool thing to flip through. So I agree. I do hope that it has more, commercial potential. I know Ken really hopes there's more commercial potential as the book publisher. Gabe, did you get your copy yet?
It's still down at my parents' place.
Oh,
I'm going down there next week. Just been setting up the house, but yeah, they've got it.
Yeah, and everyone, anyone who has a copy on this call, let's see. I know Coulter, Michael, and then Giovanni's got a copy. Any of them, I would just encourage you to unmute and just talk about this thing as a product. It's not a book.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I was thinking of it more as like, it's almost like a condensed volume of the greatest guitar magazine, specifically for people who are interested in what usually doesn't get covered by guitar magazines. Like, it's about every facet of life. It's about just physicality. It's about ergonomics. It's about, doing things the right way. It's about philosophy. It's about all these different sorts of topics. There's so many different jumping off points that you could just keep going with. This could be like a whole, regular series of things that are related to playing music that is just sort of not typical music that is challenging, music that is, I guess, progressive. It's funny because when I finished the book, I was just like, the movie poster from Brazil where the guy's head is just going like this. There's so much more to explore. Every section of the book, there's just like, I need to look into better shoes. I need to look into the Alexander technique. So there's just a ton of stuff.
Yeah, Coulter, that's
Anthony-
exactly what I meant also about the book. Yeah, but who was gonna?
Anthony only lives about like 2 miles away from me. So like when I go on my 5K walks, sometimes I can like see his house from my path. And, but I haven't seen him in what, a year and a half because of COVID, roughly speaking. And so he texted me and said, hey, come over here and get your book. So I went over and he presented it to me, and I think my jaw probably dropped. I think what I said to him was, this thing is way nicer than any ridiculously expensive college textbook I've ever seen. It's you have to have it in your hands to believe it. It's kudos to everyone who put it together. It's exceptional.
Yeah, for the types of topic materials that it covers, it's the kind of thing that you might expect to see in a very white space, very, minimalist Zen kind of format. But instead, it's this very visually engaging thing that I think is maybe more compelling for the type of audience who's looking to be inspired and looking to, go off in a bunch of different directions, and more so than just, like you say, like a textbook.
Evan, do you have a copy?
Me?
Yeah.
Not yet. Oh. Not yet. Maybe I will. I should get one, shouldn't I?
Yeah, hopefully in August I can bring you one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's more than just, it's like the counterintuitive advice. Like, this book is not a book. It's a reading experience or something. I don't know. Listen to your big toe. You can't play Fracture unless you can bend your thumb, like that kind of thing. It sounds nonsensical, but for me, the whole story is almost nonsensical. The fact that something would sell, under 1,000 copies and get 20 minutes on the BBC is nonsensical to me. The fact that I started this, just thinking, can I play this? And now it's turned into sort of, I don't know, whatever this is. It's all kind of ridiculous. And I've just given up to it. Just let it happen, whatever it is. And I think I could very well see a book like this ending up on a lot of coffee tables because it is beautiful. It's fun to just flip through. The art is so beautiful. And so many people play guitar that I think if they just picked up the book, I mean, Gibson should have endorsed this book. Anyone who's flipped through it seen like 500 Les Paul pictures and stuff in it. Like, it's just a beautiful book of guitars. So yeah, it's way more than just some kid you've never heard of, picking up a CD from a band he never was that interested in, as a kid. So it's something very different now.
In a way, at least some part of the book is pretty serious.
Oh yeah.
It really is pretty serious, and just seeing it packaged this way and making, let's just hope that it will make this sort of serious information available to people who seek inspiration on a different sensory level, right? And you said that this book or the whole story doesn't make much sense to you. I believe that nowadays these things are starting to make sense, and the fact that the BBC covered this book, it's just normal. Like, nobody is selling a lot of things anymore. So if we decide that we want to have a product, as you called it, right, why not make it a great product? Why not have some serious information? Why not, like, it doesn't really matter. You could try to be more mainstream with the content, but the same number of people would probably buy it, right?
It's probably true.
So that's why, I think it's a wonderful thing to see this and to see that the response, like from a promotional side, was and hopefully will be great still, and like talking more about making sense, I think it's a very sensual book somehow, which is sort of which is sort of making me laugh, because a lot of the things you went through with Fracture, yeah, but then it the end result is some almost like some erotic literature, right?
Yeah, well, you should read between the lines. You should see there's some hidden Easter egg graphics that Dave put in there. Pretty sensuous. No, but I think Ken, I'd love to hear your response to that, because you've suffered through this and you see it in a very close but different way.
Well, but one of my great pleasures was that video with Steve doing the unpacking, just the slow pace and the gentle, removing it from the box. That gave me a real thrill. So when you say it's a sensuous book, I have to agree. And I do think we should mention that this book in this form can only be bought from you, Anthony, or from you or I. The book that you buy online from Amazon or other online places, it's not the same quality of printing. It's not the same book at all. It has its advantages and it's still beautiful, but it's not a stunning work of art like what you're holding in your hand there.
Yeah, so today is the official release date of the book, which means you can go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or other online publishers, or whatever those are called, storefronts, and you can buy a copy that is print on demand. It's the cover looks pretty much exactly the same. The book is actually thicker. The print on demand paper is heavier, but it's not glossy. The ink is not as deeply saturating on the page and all that. Still a great product, and you can probably get free shipping if you're an Amazon Prime member. And for us, shipping from Arizona to Europe is, $45 or something like that. So, if you wanted to save some money and still get the book and its content, you can get the print on demand edition starting today. I think it's $89.95 at Amazon in the US. I actually ordered a copy myself just to see what it'll be like. I think it comes next week, but all the continents should have local printers that where you can order it for yourself without, paying $40 some for shipping. And I think our price is a little higher because of the higher quality.
Well, it's interesting to note that the paper weight is exactly the same for both versions. It's the thickness of the paper. The Amazon print-on-demand version is more like what you're used to with copier paper. This is like a clay finished, art type paper in this custom version. So the weight of the paper is the same, but the thickness is not.
Mhm.
Either way, it's a nice product, but this, if you want one that's going to make your head spin a little bit, where you can literally, you feel the sheet music. Marcus, have you noticed if you run your finger over the sheet music?
I have noticed indeed, yes.
Yeah, like you can actually feel the black ink on the page. Then that's the edition you want to get from failuretofracture.com.
Yes. So let's at least try and give people, the opportunity to ask questions if there are any questions. I mean, is there anybody here who wants to ask Anthony or even Gabriel? Michael or Ken? Yeah, Bill?
Yeah.
I just saw Bill raising his hand. Bill, yeah.
Yeah, I was. You've concentrated on the really, really hard parts of Fracture, but did you learn the opening sequence too? Because that's an important part of the music.
Yeah,
I was always curious.
Absolutely. And I released video performances of Fracture and Fractured in their entirety from start to finish. Played through a real amp, played with real gear. And that was actually a different form of art for me, because I normally just plug into an amp. I don't usually use effects. I'll use distortion, but that's about it. But Fracture in particular has such a dynamic range that there's parts where you have to make a decision on, am I going to keep the distortion pedal on and turn the gain or the volume down on my instrument, or is it better to turn off the distortion and then turn it back on when appropriate? And that's really tricky because the parts are so different. So there's the intro, you know, that whole thing. But the way that you have to listen to how Robert's gain changes when the octaves come in, F, G, B, A, da, 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 you know, that part, because when he starts going up to the A section right afterward, there is a sort of growl to it. So you do want to have enough gain, but so there's a lot of like just very performance focused stuff that I didn't actually spend a whole lot of time thinking about until the months leading up to the actual video performance. So yes, you can watch the whole piece start to finish. I give myself a B- for the performances on both of them. I had 3 cameras running, lighting, audio gear, microphones, batteries, hard drive storage, all of this stuff on my mind. And every time I made a mistake, it was like, oh, Robert's going to say something. Oh, you know, it's Steve will poke at me, whatever. Someone's going to say something, the trolls or whatever. And then I would make enough mistakes, you know, I'd lose control of my mind, and then I'd have to start a new take. But I did eventually get a B- worthy video performance of each song, including Fractured and all of its craziness. And I played both Adrian's and Robert's parts on the one guitar in NST. So yeah, just different aspects of things that you have to consider when you're performing these pieces. So yeah, check them out on YouTube. Exactly. C's make degrees, Michael. Thanks, Bill. Good question.
Anthony, did you learn Fracture in both tunings? Like for people who don't, for people who don't know, Robert Fripp started using a new tuning in around 84, and it's completely different from the tuning that he used originally, and it sort of like puts it into a different. There's a different symmetry, and so you did both.
Yeah. So starting at page 150 is the Fracture in original standard tuning section. And then there is the, I forget where it is, but then I cover, I think it's the section called an evolution, the evolution in NST. So starting on page 186, I have only the moto perpetuo transcribed in NST, and Robert makes some accommodations for himself. So I had to kind of guess on the notes, and Gabe Riccio, bless that man's heart. I mean, he's so helpful and smart. You know, I do these transcriptions and then I send them to Gabe and he tells me how wrong they are, or like what assumptions I'm making that are incorrect. And he's the kind of guy that you just, you know, he's so humble and kind about it. But this is hard stuff. Like when Robert, there's a part, instead of the descending augmented chords, you know, he actually plays this it's actually a 4-note riff, but the 4th note is sort of unclear because he's half playing it and half transitioning the left hand to the next segment. And so we made some guesses in terms of compositional intention of what he's doing, but this is based on the performance from the Meltdown concert live in Mexico. Mm-hmm. And then starting around page 200, maybe, that's where we start getting into Fractured. Mm-hmm. I guess it's like, yeah, page 206. Look at this graphic, just unbelievable. Fractured NST, just beautiful. Mm-hmm. Anyway, page 206, that's when we start getting into how to even approach it. And one thing that helped me to get through what's called the terror sections or the brutal sections is to break the motifs into what I call sentences. And Robert does sort of permutations on these sentences. And Gabe helped me a lot with the way to think about this. Gabe's notation is very different than mine because I think of the whole sentence and Gabe thinks in terms of like the composition. You can speak to that, Gabe, but that's why in my book it's 15/8 because I think of it as so it's the way I think of it is these clusters of 16th notes that all add up to 15/8 notes, but that's probably not how it was composed. So my transcription in this book is largely about how I think about these pieces, not how Robert or any transcriptionist would actually lay them out. So even if you were to buy this book and then let's just say Gabe and Trey put out a book of construction of light transcriptions for some weird reason, and that the transcription, the notes will be the same, but the clustering or the grouping and the beaming will be different.
Anthony, I have a quick question for you. Which did you find the most challenging, OST or NST on the fracture piece?
Oh, well, NST for sure, because I actually did some math on this. With original standard tuning, first of all, it focuses, everything pivots around the middle finger. And so the middle finger is the strongest finger in your hand. You can exert the most force, with your middle finger. And so using that as sort of like a foundational place for pivoting the rest of your other fingers it allows you to start from a position of strength. But in NST, the way the motif ends up working is, I think it's either 50% or 66%, somewhere between 1/2 and 2/3 of the notes in every measure are based on your pinky and ring finger. So you are spending a lot more time exercising these weaker fingers that are notorious, like difficult in terms of separation and independence. So as a player, the NST version really makes you focus on your pinky and ring finger. And these are like Tommy Emmanuel. I went to one of his master classes and he said he spent 3 months playing only with his pinky, only with his left hand pinky. Every melody he could think of, every interval he could think of, every string change, every fret jump possible. And he tested the limits of his pinky. And fractured and fracture in NST will basically force you to do something like that if you take these pieces seriously. You're no longer starting from a position of strength based around the middle finger. Everything is moving your index finger, using your pinky and ring fingers as your foundational positions of strength. You're really starting from a position of weakness. So it's kind of like, you might get really, really good at push-ups, and then somebody says, okay, well, do a pull-up, hand forward pull-up, and then suddenly you realize, oh, I'm really strong with these muscles, but not these other ones. So it's just it's really tough. That's it. It's tough.
Do we have any other questions?
Giovanni, I can't believe is he even on anymore?
Can't see him.
He stayed on mute the whole time. It was wild.
Mm.
Well,
Yeah.
can I say something?
Yeah.
Yeah, in my case, it's been like a crazy experience because I live in Spain, the mailing and everything. So the book has been quite expensive. Then the thing is that I don't play guitar. I don't know any music. So half of the book is musical notations and so on. It's like if I had bought a book like in Chinese or it's Greek to me, but still it's nice. So I guess that every once in a while to do something crazy is a very good idea.
Well, thank you for buying it. Thank you for being crazy. You know, the world needs more crazy people doing crazy things that don't injure other people.
Yeah, it's a wonderful piece of work, and thank you, Ken, for enduring the pain in the neck for a year or longer. And so, like, you know, Anthony, would you say that this book wouldn't have happened without COVID?
No, I would not say that. And I actually wrote it. I started it February 23rd or 26th, and I wrote about 70% of it in 2 weeks. I write about, when I sit down to write a book, I write about 5,000 words a day. And I stop because my fingers get tired. But I have this metric that Ken Kaufman gave me. He said, a respectable novel is no shorter than 70,000 words. And so 5,000 times 14 days is 70,000. So I don't know, it just kind of worked out that way. Now I have it in my head that, like, if I'm going to write a book, it's going to be in just a few weeks. And I don't start writing until I just cannot resist the temptation anymore. But this happened before the pandemic really hit. And it was going to happen regardless. But the release date was certainly affected by COVID. And Dave, the designer, you know, he spent about 10 months with it, but I'm glad for COVID with respect to the production of this book, because I don't think Robert would have given it nearly as much attention. Like, he read through some of the early draft that I sent him, and he offered some corrections. And he's offered commentary all through COVID, not just like sort of joking about me. Like, my friend Chris Opperman printed one of Robert's status updates, and I have it up on my wall there. That wooden block is actually a printout of Robert. Oh, I think my camera's gonna die. I just unplugged it. 1 sec.
Yeah.
But also the fact that the Agony Ants series did so well, and then he offered, like, I just asked the question in the comments like anybody else, and then he gave a 45-second kind of complimentary blurb about the book. So without that stuff, I don't think I would have gotten nearly as much attention, I guess. So when the mysterious dude who doesn't endorse products and doesn't offer quotes gives you a product, an endorsement, and a quote, that's a pretty big deal. And I don't think that would have happened without COVID. In fact, Steve Vai called me on the phone and he goes, "You got the old man to give you a quote?" He's like, "How did you do that?" So I think COVID is the answer, you know, for that question. But yeah, the lockdowns, as unfortunate as the circumstances have been, for those of us who are introverts and, you know, get creative when you're alone, it's been kind of a time to thrive in a sense.
So Anthony, your book Clueless at the Work was your first book, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was also published by Ken?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, because I remember that I think the very last time we saw each other, you had just started writing that book. You were extremely excited and you told me that you had just started writing.
That's right. And I finished the book about a week and a half later. And
that
then there was like another month of edits and stuff. Ken and I just read it a couple of times, and then it was basically done. Dave also did the cover artwork and stuff for that book. But yeah, that was right around the last time I saw you.
Yeah.
For C Prague, I think.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that's 2 years, almost 2 years.
That's
But you've
right.
written 2 books. So
Yeah,
amazing.
I'm hoping to do one a year. But I do remember Henry dancing at Sea Prague, which was wonderful.
Yes. Okay. So thank you very much, Anthony.
Marcus,
You
thank
know,
you.
I wish you a lot of success with the book, and I think this is the kind of product that has a long shelf life, that will get discovered and rediscovered over and over again over decades, and I really believe so. And thank you for spending all those hours learning a string of 16th notes that I actually like. Okay, here we go. So thank you, everybody else, and yeah, keep ordering the book. Yeah, I just see like Chris Chastain just ordered the book, so keep ordering it. It's a wonderful thing, and thank you, and bye bye. Right, Anthony, you want to say anything else?
I'll just say once again, thank you to anyone who cares about this, and extra special thanks for the people who put their time and energy into it. Gabe Riccio, just unbelievable. I can't wait for you to get your hands on the book. Michael Hacker, Renee King, Dave Woodruff, of course, my wife. I mean, I cannot go through this without acknowledging my wife's patience, supreme patience. She hates this music, and imagine hearing it for years and years and years. Yeah, and I use a tool called SoundSlice. They give me a free account, and it's a really wonderful online sheet music resource. You can synchronize videos with your sheet music. It's awesome. I compose in my web browser now. So obviously Alex Anthony Faida, we didn't even mention him. The guy is a beast, a monster. Steve Ball, Bernie Quiroga, my dad, Trey. There's interviews with Trey Gunn, Pat Mastelotto, and Sid Smith in this book. Ricardo Odriozola, he wrote a whole section of this book, and his stuff is really helpful. He's a violinist out of Norway. You might have seen his string arrangement of Fractured on YouTube. Robert has shared it. And then, of course, the whole guitar circle community. There are pages and pages of Facebook comments in this book from, everyone from, if you look through Robert Fripp's comment section, nearly all of those people are in this book. So just thanks to everyone. The Dave Woodruff, I don't even know how to repay him. He did this for free for me because he loves the content, and we're just good friends. So I guess the whole theme of this is find great friends and do something with them. That's really all that matters.
A labor of love.
Yeah.
And friendship.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye bye for now. Thanks, Anthony. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Anthony. Marcus.
Thank you, everyone.